Picture this. I'm that devoted mom who scraped together every penny from my janitor job to gift my only son the family home over $1 million worth as his wedding present. I thought it was the ultimate act of love, handing him stability on a silver platter. But just 3 days later, that ungrateful brat slammed the door right in my face, screaming, "You're just an old nobody. I don't need you anymore." There I was, barefoot on the driveway, tears streaming down my cheeks, neighbors gawking like it was some trashy reality show. Homeless at 68, betrayed by the boy I raised alone. What he didn't know? I've got a bombshell secret from my past that connects straight to his powerful boss. The front door didn't just slam. It locked behind me like I'd never belonged. I stood there barefoot, my heels pressed into the hot driveway. My suitcase tipped over in the grass, one wheel stuck in the mud patch that Ethan never got around to fixing, even though I'd asked him 3 times. No one came out. Not even Rachel, who I caught peeking through the living room blinds before vanishing like smoke. I guess the show was over. Funny. Just 3 weeks ago, I was making up the guest room for their honeymoon. Washed the sheets twice, added lavender sachets to the pillows like Rachel liked, even though she once called my linens depressingly beige. Now my linens are probably in the trash. It started in early June. Ethan had just gotten engaged and was anxious about money. His voice had that rehearsed softness when he said, "Mom, I just don't think we'll ever be able to afford a house like this." I should have known. But I wanted him to have something steady, something I never had when I was raising him alone on late-night janitor shifts and leftover spaghetti. I worked 33 years at Dunley High, scrubbing gum off desks and wiping urine off bathroom walls just to keep that roof over our heads. The house was all I had, so I signed it over, deed, keys, everything, as a wedding gift. "This is yours now," I said, handing him the envelope at the rehearsal dinner. He cried. I believed those tears. But the bad signs had been there. Quiet things. Skipped birthdays. Late replies. Rachel telling people I used to be a janitor, like I was some cautionary tale from a PBS special. But even quiet disrespect leaves bruises. Last Thanksgiving, Rachel set the table without a place for me. I ended up eating on a stool by the kitchen counter, using a dessert fork because the rest were already on the table. Ethan saw it. Didn't say a word. Then there were the jokes, always lighthearted. "Oh, Mom, you wouldn't understand this app. Don't worry about splitting the bill. You've done enough scrubbing for one life." Ha ha. Always in front of people. Always said with a smile. But the one that cut deepest came 2 nights before they threw me out. Rachel had just come back from some prenatal yoga class and found me humming while I sorted baby socks in the laundry room. She leaned on the doorframe with that syrupy smile and said, "We're so grateful, but we really want to protect our peace. We don't need your kind of energy around the nursery." My kind of energy. I stood there holding a tiny pair of yellow socks with ducks on them and felt like I'd been slapped. I nodded, said nothing, like I always did, because somewhere deep down, I was still the woman who thought staying quiet would earn me a place at the table. But now I was sitting at a grimy bus stop with cold muffins and calloused palms, realizing I'd been tolerated, not loved. And it wasn't just Rachel. Ethan changed the day he got his first bonus check, started calling me Dorothy instead of Mom when his coworkers were around. Told people he grew up in a hard-working neighborhood, like our house was some sob story, not the place he took his first steps in. That house was supposed to be my legacy. Instead, it became my eviction notice. But as the bus finally pulled up, brakes squealing, I felt something I hadn't in years, a crack of clarity. I didn't just lose my home, I lost my son. And if they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they didn't know me at all. The bus was half empty, mostly kids with headphones and a few older folks who looked just as invisible as I felt. I stared out the window, but I wasn't seeing the strip malls and gas stations pass by. I was seeing him, Richard Camden, a name I hadn't spoken out loud in over 20 years. Ethan doesn't know that name. Rachel sure as hell doesn't. To them, I'm just Dorothy. The janitor mom who scraped gum off desks and smelled like disinfectant. That's all they see. That's all they ever wanted to see. They never asked who I was before Ethan, before scrubbing toilets and rationing payday meals. They never knew I used to be married to the man who built Camden Freight from the ground up, the largest logistics firm in the region. Richard Camden. He wasn't Ethan's father, but he was his stepfather for a short, strange chapter in our lives. Ethan was too young to remember, and I never brought it up. We divorced quietly, on decent terms. Richard needed more freedom, I needed more peace. No drama, no shouting. Just two people who drifted apart. But Richard wasn't cruel. He left me the car, a few bonds, and an open invitation to call if I ever needed anything. I never did. Until now. I pulled out my phone and stared at the black screen. I hadn't dialed his number in decades. I wasn't even sure it still worked. But my fingers moved anyway. Muscle memory from a different life. It rang once, then twice. "Camden," a voice answered, deep and slightly hoarse. I froze, then whispered, "Richard, it's Dorothy." Silence, just breathing on the other end. Then, "Dot?" His voice cracked. "What happened?" "I need help." I choked on the words. "Ethan threw me out." A pause. "You mean out of the house?" I swallowed. "The one I gave him. It's gone, Richard. Everything's gone." He didn't ask for details. He didn't hesitate. "Where are you?" "Bridgeway Transit, heading north. I don't know where to go." "Get off at Oakwood Station. I'll have a car waiting. You'll stay here. We'll talk when you arrive." Click. That was it. I hadn't spoken to him in 21 years, and within 1 minute, I had a roof over my head again. The bus shuddered as it pulled into the next stop. I stood, grabbed my suitcase, and got off. As the doors hissed closed behind me, I felt it. Not comfort, not yet, but momentum. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to remember who I used to be. Bridgewell was a quiet, wealthy stretch of shoreline an hour out, a place I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. As the train curved past silver lakes and iron gates, I caught my reflection in the window, wrinkled, weary, but not broken. I'd nearly forgotten who I used to be when I lived behind gates like those, with fresh manicures and weekend charity galas, back when people opened doors for me instead of shutting them in my face. Richard was waiting at the platform, still tall, still that same careful presence, like someone who'd always known how to walk into a room and own it. His hair was grayer now, neatly kept, but his eyes locked onto mine like no time had passed. He opened his arms and I stepped into them before I could second-guess it. He smelled like cedar and old money. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have called you years ago." "I didn't think I'd need anyone," I said into his chest. "I thought I was managing just fine." He pulled back, gave me a once-over. "He threw you out?" 3 days after I gave him the house. A slow, cold fury settled over his face. "And you didn't call me until now?" I didn't want pity. "You're not getting pity," he said sharply. "You're getting options." His car was already waiting. A black sedan, sleek and silent. Inside, his personal attorney, Mark Gelder, sat with a briefcase balanced on his lap. I recognized him instantly, Richard's legal pit bull. "Mrs. Camden," he said, nodding, "we've been briefed." I didn't correct the name. "Not tonight." Back at Richard's estate, they showed me to a guest room larger than my old living room. The sheets were crisp. The view overlooked a lit fountain and a rose garden still in bloom. I didn't sit. I didn't unpack. I walked straight into Richard's study, where he and Mark were waiting by the fireplace, 2 glasses of bourbon already poured. "We can sue," Mark said calmly. "You gave the house as a gift, but if they coerced you emotionally or misrepresented intentions—" "I don't want revenge," I said, voice steady. "I want dignity." Mark raised an eyebrow. "We can do dignity." But Richard wasn't listening to Mark anymore. He was watching me. Really watching me. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Let's see how Ethan handles seeing who the real nobody is." I sat down across from him, still in the clothes I'd worn on the train, suitcase untouched by the door. The room smelled like old leather, polished wood, and something else I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I'm not trying to ruin him, I said carefully. He's still my son. Richard didn't flinch. And I'm not trying to ruin him either. I'm trying to stop him. There's a difference. He turned to Mark, who was already flipping open a file. We ran a quiet search, he said. You're still listed in Camden Freight's internal archive as a former outreach volunteer, barely mentioned. No bio, no photo, not even an exit date. I let out a bitter laugh. So I'm already a ghost. You were more than a volunteer, Richard said. You helped create the damn program. You wrote the first grant proposals, secured our first federal match. You taught me how to speak to factory workers like human beings, not numbers. I did that because I believed in it, and in you. He looked down, silent for a moment. Then, you built something that still stands, and your son just erased you from his life like you were dead weight. I stared into the fire. The weight of what I'd lost wasn't just a house. It was the story of who I was, replaced by Rachel's baby books and Instagram perfect decor. I want my version of the truth back, I said slowly. I want to stop apologizing for existing. I want to sit in a room and not feel like I'm one polite suggestion away from being discarded again. Mark nodded. Then we start with establishing two things, your history and his. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. My name was typed neatly on the front. Let's rebuild your place in this company's foundation, on paper, in memory, in records. And Ethan? I asked. Richard leaned back, folding his arms. We'll get to him. First, we put you back on the map. I placed my hand on the folder. It felt heavier than it should have, like it held a part of me I hadn't touched in years, and I wasn't going to let anyone erase it again. Richard showed me a file, thin, corporate, precise. It was Ethan's HR record from Camden Freight. And right there, under emergency contact, I wasn't listed. But worse, under parent/guardian, next to mother, the field didn't say unknown. It said deceased. I stared at it for a long moment, like maybe if I blinked hard enough, it would change. Did he really? I said quietly. Kill me off on paper? Richard didn't respond. He didn't have to. The shame on his face said enough. I wasn't even a footnote in my own son's life anymore. Not a contact, not a person, a ghost. And yet, here I was, very much alive, sitting in the estate office of the company I helped him walk into, wearing borrowed slippers, and drinking tea like I was the damn housemaid. He had to manually enter that field, Mark added from the desk, flipping pages. It's not an automated input. He chose it. A cold, nauseating wave passed through me. Not a mistake. A decision. And for what? Convenience? To look like a self-made man with no strings? Or was I just too inconvenient to mention at the office holiday party? Richard tapped the page. He started here 6 months ago. Junior project manager, entry level, but already climbing fast. He's working under regional logistics. That's Camden Freight's biggest growth division right now. I didn't say anything, just kept looking at the line that declared me dead. You're not going to cry? Richard asked gently. No, I said. I think I did that already. In the driveway, there was a long silence. Then I looked up. Let's keep going. Mark nodded once and laid out a short list of internal emails and calendar logs. Ethan's work computer showed long evenings at the office. Vendor meetings, approval flows, expense reports. He's been very hands-on with vendor contracts, Mark said. A little too hands-on, I blinked. What does that mean? Richard leaned forward. It means we have our first breadcrumb, and if I know that boy, he's not careful when he thinks no one's watching. I sat back, the nausea shifting to something sharper. Curiosity. He erased me, I whispered, but he kept my instincts. What do you mean? He used to ask me to balance his checking account in college, said I had a better eye for catching small discrepancies. He doesn't realize I remember what sloppy looks like. Mark slid another folder toward me. Then you'll want to see this next. It was a printout of Ethan's vendor access logs, and even at a glance I saw it. The pattern, the familiar mistake. He left a trail. Now I was going to follow it. I hadn't touched a financial ledger in years, not since before I left Richard, before Ethan was old enough to spell fraud. But the moment I saw those vendor logs, something inside me snapped back into place, like an old muscle remembering how to work. Mark handed me a stack of reports. These are vendor bonuses, processed under Ethan's employee ID. Looks routine until you realize he approved bonuses for vendors not in his project chain. I scanned the figures. They were slick, spaced just far enough apart to avoid notice, rounded, always under the audit threshold, but too familiar. He's siphoning, I said flatly, kicking small bonuses into a dummy account, probably under a shell vendor. Richard raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yes, I said, flipping to a second page. Look here, he's processing 3-step approval flows on vendors that should go straight through. He's creating review stages that don't exist on the master protocol. He learned this from watching me do audits when he was a teenager. Mark leaned in. You used to audit vendor paths? I designed them, I said. Back when Camden Freight was still trying to prove we weren't just a white-collar freight scam. Richard let out a soft whistle. Damn, I traced the login trail with my fingertip. This account name here, LNR Solutions, that's a ghost vendor. No web presence, no tax ID in the payroll file, but the payments are consistent. $2,800 here, $3,400 there. He's testing the limits. And now? Mark asked. Now, I said. We test back. I asked Richard for full access to Camden's internal audit system. He nodded once, made a call, and within the hour I had a tablet, 2 encrypted drives, and a digital key with admin-level clearance. Just like that, I was back in the system, as if I'd never left. You're not worried this will get ugly? Richard asked that night, pouring me a cup of tea before bed. I stared at the screen. Ugly was the driveway. This is just math. He smiled at that. You've still got it. I didn't respond, because something deeper than pride was driving me now. This wasn't just about what Ethan had done. It was about how easily he thought he could do it. He didn't just steal money. He rewrote history, turned the woman who gave him everything into a fictional corpse and a financial excuse. Well, the corpse was logging back in. The text came in just after midnight. Seriously? Clinging to your ex now? Pathetic. Stay out of my life. No, Mom. No punctuation, just flat cruelty typed fast and without hesitation, like he'd been waiting to say it. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because by the time he hit send, Richard had already forwarded it to Camden Freight's HR department, along with a quiet little note. This employee listed his mother as deceased in official documentation. She is alive and residing at my home. Mark added another line beneath it. Suggest cross-referencing this with the falsified medical hardship statements filed on his benefits review last quarter. By breakfast, the company's compliance officer had scheduled a meeting. I didn't ask to be part of it, not yet. I had more digging to do, but the tremor had begun, and Ethan had felt it. By the end of the week, I had full access to Ethan's internal messaging threads, calendar audits, and expense approvals. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was documenting. But the thing that gutted me, what really sank in, wasn't the fraud. It was how ordinary he made it all seem. Vendor conflict cleared. Had to smooth it with a dinner plus bottle. Need invoice routing to go through LNR before Tuesday. She's too nosy otherwise. She. That was me. I was she. An obstacle. An inconvenience. A relic. Rachel, of course, was silent. Her name didn't appear in any of the internal logs. She was too smart for that. But her fingerprints were there. An expense report filed for prenatal care at a boutique clinic nowhere near their insurance network. A company wellness credit used to buy nursery furniture. All approved by Ethan. They weren't just deleting me, they were replacing me. But not yet. Because what Ethan didn't know, and Rachel didn't suspect, was that Richard wasn't just hosting me. He was preparing me. And soon, I'd walk through the very same doors Ethan used to climb and make sure someone held him accountable for every step he skipped on the way up. The truth was buried in plain sight, just scattered, like breadcrumbs on polished marble. I spent 2 days combing through internal systems, vendor logs, email chains, archived approvals. Richard had given me full admin access, and Camden Freight didn't know the quiet little ghost in the system used to help design it. I found 2 documents that changed everything. The first was a falsified invoice, $12,700 for logistics advisory services from a shell company in Wisconsin. The approval path was familiar, too clean. And then I saw the signature, not Ethan's, Richard Camden's, except Richard hadn't touched an approval queue in over 4 years. Mark confirmed it. Ethan had used Richard's executive credentials to push the invoice through. Forgery, plain and simple. The second document came from internal messaging logs, a private Slack channel between Ethan and another mid-level manager. A casual chat. No professionalism, no filter. He's a senile old liability who still thinks people care about his legacy. I'm just trying to clean up his mess before the board notices. He, of course, was Richard. And the timestamp on the message? A week before Ethan invited Richard to, quote, sit down and talk about future strategy over drinks. Fake flattery by day, mockery by night. Mark printed both documents and slid them across the desk without a word. Richard didn't say anything either. He just stared at the invoice with a hollow kind of calm, then looked up at me. Do you think he even believes the things he writes? I don't think he thinks at all, I said. He just wants what he wants. Legacy, connections, authority, without any of the weight that comes with earning them. Richard's jaw tightened. He thought stealing my name would make him important. He doesn't realize the name only has value because of the people who built it. I was one of them, I said. He looked at me. You were the best of them. I took the papers, placed them in a file with my name on it. He called me dead, I said quietly. He stole your name. He sold lies to keep his lifestyle. And? Mark asked. And now, I said, we stopped being polite. But that night I cried. Not because of the documents, not because of the boardroom plans, or the strategy sessions Richard and Mark kept refining over dinner like it was just another business quarter. I cried because I missed my son, not the man Ethan had become, slick, sharp-tongued, and full of entitlement, but the boy who used to wait for me outside the janitor's closet with cafeteria cookies wrapped in a napkin. Saved you the best one, he'd say, the one with the most chocolate chips. That boy felt a lifetime away. I sat on the edge of the guest bed in Richard's estate, the tablet screen still glowing beside me. My name sat at the top of the file we'd built over 2 weeks. Dorothy Camden, Internal Documentation, 1992 to 2003. Community Division, Compliance Review, Crisis Relief Implementation. My fingerprints were all over this company. All these years, I thought I'd just helped out for a while. I didn't see it as legacy work. I was just doing what needed to be done, because that's what mothers do, at home, at work, in life. And yet, I'd been written out, not forgotten, erased. I wiped my face, walked to the bathroom, and stared at the woman in the mirror. Puffy eyes, wrinkled skin, silver streaks at the hairline I used to color out of habit. You earned this, I whispered to her. Every inch of it. The betrayal didn't hurt because of the money or the house or the lies. It hurt because somewhere along the way, I'd convinced myself that loving Ethan, raising him, protecting him, handing him that deed with shaking hands, would somehow earn his respect. But respect can't be gifted, and apparently, neither could decency. Still, I wasn't seeking vengeance. I wasn't here to burn his life down or poison his reputation. I just wanted the truth to outlive the lies. And if that meant walking into a boardroom full of men in suits and reminding them whose backbones had kept their books balanced all these years, then so be it. Richard knocked once before stepping into the doorway. You okay? I nodded, just remembering. He studied me for a second, then said, let's make sure this isn't the memory that lasts. I turned off the screen, pulled the file folder into my lap, and smoothed it flat with my hand. Tomorrow, Ethan would see me. And this time, he wouldn't be able to slam any doors. The boardroom was all glass and silence. You could hear a pen drop or a career unravel. Ethan walked in with his usual charm turned up, slim cut suit, half smile, a tan from somewhere expensive. He carried a presentation folder under one arm like it contained the keys to the kingdom. "Morning," he said, with that fake humility he used on anyone over 60. "Thanks for having me. Hope everyone had time to review the vendor summary?" No one answered. Richard sat at the head of the table. Unreadable. I was in the far corner, behind a low privacy panel, tucked into a seat marked Guest of Executive. Ethan hadn't noticed me when he walked in, or maybe he had, and just assumed I was some harmless old consultant. He launched into his pitch like it was any other Monday. Slide deck, bullet points, bloated numbers, that same cadence he used when lying to teachers about late assignments. Then, midway through, Richard raised a hand. "That's enough, Ethan. Let's pause." Ethan blinked. "Did I skip something?" Richard leaned forward, folding his hands. "There's someone here who needs to speak before we go further." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. The CFO turned her head. That's when Richard turned toward me. "Dorothy, would you?" I stood, and for the first time in 15 years, my son saw me not as a doormat, but as a witness. His eyes widened. "What?" "I'm not dead," I said calmly, placing a folder on the table. "But apparently, according to this company's records, I've been for years." He froze. Completely. Mark slid the folder down the table toward the compliance officer. Mrs. Dorothy Camden, formerly Dorothy Holloway, served as co-founder of Camden Freight's Community Outreach Division from 1992 to 2003. Her name was removed from all internal archives without cause or consent. I met Ethan's eyes. "I didn't just mop floors, Ethan. I helped build the foundation under your feet. And I was still scrubbing when you were learning to walk." He couldn't speak. "Your vendor files," I continued, "mirror a structure I helped design, that you're now abusing." The board chair leaned back slowly. "We had no idea." "No one did," I said, "because someone made sure of that." Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Richard let the silence stretch before closing his binder. "Let's take a short break. When we return, we'll be reviewing some very important documents." I sat back down, pulse steady. Let him sweat. Let them all remember my name. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The papers did all the shouting. One by one, I slid each document across the polished boardroom table, the kind of table Ethan used to dream of sitting at when he was a kid eating cereal on a milk crate in our first apartment. Now he was shrinking behind it. First, the altered invoices. Dates changed, vendors inflated, duplicate payments rerouted through shell companies. His initials neatly stamped at the bottom of every falsified trail. Second, the vendor kickbacks. A series of consulting payments traced back to an account linked to an LLC registered to a P.O. box in Phoenix, one that hadn't existed until 4 months ago. Then I laid down the forged executive email, a direct approval, digitally signed by Richard, except Richard hadn't logged into the system in years. And finally, I unfolded the page I'd saved for last, the HR form. Simple, stark, parent/guardian, mother, deceased. I held it up between 2 fingers like it smelled. "This is what my son submitted to your records office," I said. "Filed digitally, no edits, no explanation." Ethan's face was locked somewhere between disbelief and panic. "I may be old," I said, tapping the paper, "but I'm not gone, and I'm not nobody." The room was dead silent. The compliance officer cleared her throat. "These documents have all been verified through internal systems?" Mark nodded. "And externally cross-checked where needed." Ethan finally found his voice. This is a misunderstanding. I was told to..." "Don't lie," I said, calm as ever. "Not in front of the people you were trying to fool. And definitely not in front of me." His mouth snapped shut. "You didn't just take money, Ethan," I continued. "You took names, erased people, pretended you built something you inherited." He opened his hands like he still had cards to play. "This is insane. She's not even a current employee. Why is she even here?" "She's here," Richard said, "because you used her silence as cover. Because without her work, this company wouldn't be where it is." I looked around the room. Board members, department heads, compliance staff. Eyes that had once skimmed past me were now locked in, focused. I never wanted to be the loudest voice, I said, but I won't be the quietest casualty either. I sat down. My hands didn't shake. I'd scrubbed too many floors to tremble in front of thieves. There wasn't a second vote. No back and forth. No let's circle back after review. The Ethics Committee voted unanimously. Ethan Camden, terminated for cause. The room emptied in silence. No handshakes, no small talk. Just the slow crumbling of a name that had once opened every door. His badge was deactivated by the end of the day. His company accounts locked before he even left the building. I didn't stay to watch him pack his desk. I didn't need to. Camden Freight's internal memo went out the next morning. Direct, unapologetic. The company has terminated Mr. Ethan Camden following confirmed violations of ethical and financial conduct policies. Details have been reviewed by our legal and compliance teams. All bonuses, pending stock options, and discretionary pay have been rescinded. They didn't hide behind vague language. His name was there, his actions spelled out line by line. No more hiding, no more pretending. I got a copy of the memo forwarded to my inbox, not by Richard, but by a junior HR assistant I'd trained during the 2001 compliance shakeup. She'd found my name in the old outreach archives and remembered. Her message was short. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Camden, you never deserved this. Thank you for everything you built. It broke something in me, and it mended something else. As for Rachel, she didn't wait long. By Thursday, she'd filed for separation. No press statement, just a legal motion and a quiet request to remove Ethan's name from the nursery trust. I heard about it from Mark over tea. She's flipping on him fast, he said, handing me the documents. Asset protection, smart, cold. She always was, I said, just better at hiding it than he was. Richard just shook his head. Funny how fast they scatter when the gravy train goes off the rails. I didn't smile. Not exactly. Because none of this felt like a victory. It felt like confirmation. That I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined the erasure, the dismissal, the lies. That someone had finally said out loud, in official ink and signatures, that what happened to me mattered. It didn't fix the years I lost, or the damage Ethan had done, but it marked the beginning of something new, something mine. Richard didn't stop with Ethan's firing. He knew I needed more than justice. I needed restoration. 3 days after the ethics vote, he handed me a thin white envelope over breakfast. No ceremony, no preamble. Inside was a deed. A penthouse condo overlooking Lake Camden. Floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop garden, keyed elevator. Full transfer, he said simply. No ties, no conditions. You keep it or sell it. Up to you, but it's yours. I didn't know what to say. He poured me a cup of tea, same as always. This house has had power for decades, he said. Time it had purpose. The silence between us said everything else. I signed the papers that afternoon. No second thoughts, no hesitation. He wasn't giving me charity. He was returning what had always been partially mine. I moved in the next week, planted fresh lavender at the edge of the stone path, took down the stiff portraits in the dining room, filled the bookshelf with worn paperbacks and community grant ledgers from the 90s. Some days, I walk past the old guest room where I cried myself to sleep that first night and smile. Not bitter, just full. Because the woman who arrived here with a suitcase and a bruised soul is gone. What's left is someone older, wiser, still standing, and more visible than ever. Thank you for spending time with me and listening to my story. What would you do if the son you gave everything to, your home, your years, your love, threw you out like trash, and you had the chance to take back your dignity without stooping to his level? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it their way.